Hello and welcome to this new video where I'm today going to talk about VCT EMEA Stage 1, a little bit about each team, and then do the pick'ems sort of like in between. Basically, I'm going to be talking about the team in order of which game they're playing. So I'm going to start with Team Vitality Giants, then BBL Carmine Corps. So I'm kind of going to do a bit week 1 pick'ems combined with talking about roster moves and just what my thoughts in general of the teams. So why don't we start? So the first game of the week is gonna be Team Vitality versus Giant X, um, which I think is gonna be a pretty simple one. Um, I'm obviously gonna show you my pick'ems later, although I do think this game is gonna be closer than a lot of people think. As we do have Team Vitality actually making transfer moves, which I feel like a lot of people were surprised by it, me included. I do feel like this almost feels like a predetermined move. Like, Team Vitality was like, all right, we'll play with Trex for now, and then by stage 1, we'll change over to Saivoth. And I don't think they expected to make Bangkok, to be completely honest, or do as well as they did. Because if they knew that, I feel like, why the fuck would you change out Trex? Because Trex was so good. Like, this entire team just looked so good. Um, but yeah, we had some known issues coming into the season, or like known like rumored issues with like just kind of like Trace, Trex, and Safe, and like them having like very different like ideas of how to call, and both of them being really vocal about it, and that's probably my why I think they did this move. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, that's the theory that's going around, and I think that's probably why um, they made this move. But yeah, this type of stats are from VCL, so the Tier 2 EMEA Split 1, and I mean, he's a really good player, like very, very good player. Like he was not at one of the worst teams in that tournament, but he was one of the worst teams. Like he was probably like, I'm pretty sure if we actually let me check. I'm pretty sure Mandatory, the team he played for. Um, yeah, they finished okay. They finished third. So they weren't one of the worst teams, but basically they made it out of their playoffs group pretty easily. And then when it came to playoffs, there was obviously 4 teams there. I would say they were probably third, pretty significantly worse than both Eternal Fire and BBO Pacific. Um, but yeah, basically it was him versus a bunch of Turkish people, Turkish players, and he was standing up on his own and looked really good. So I don't doubt this guy will be good. I do have some role concerns as they don't really have a Sova player now. Like both Sivov and Kicks are sort of that sort of flash initiator role. Um, I'm gonna assume that Safe is gonna go over to full time smokes now. Um, we're gonna have less on the Senti slash Viper. Maybe we'll see some Viper on either Kicks or Safe as well, compared on if they want a Senti and a Viper. Um, but yeah, like Kicks has never played Sova in his life, right? And I'm pretty sure Sivov hasn't either. Um, yeah, he's never played there. He's played one game of Sova in his life, and it looked kind of dog shit. So I'm a bit concerned with the recon initiator here. Like they just don't really have a set recon initiator. They've just decided to drop their flex slash recon initiator to pick up a flash initiator when they already have a really good flash initiator in Kicks. So it's a bit weird. I'm not super concerned though. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still really high on this team. I think Syvov will be good. I just think at most he's gonna be a side grade to Trex, like at most, because Trex is that good. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love with this move, um, but it's whatever to me. And obviously, like I don't think I need to introduce any of the players on this team. Maybe I'll just say that Kicks, although his stats aren't the best, I feel like um when you look at his play, like he looks really good. Like the eye tests is of Kicks is really good. Like, and look, okay, his stats isn't bad. Don't get me wrong, but his eye tests tells me that Kicks is really fucking good. Like he is the real deal. I'm actually like the thing with Syvov, right? Is even if it would have been Kicks for Syvov, right? Um, I feel like that would maybe even then just be a side grade at most. Like I don't know, man. I don't know. But yeah, moving on to Giants, and this team I think is going to continue being the sort of gatekeepers of Europe. I know people usually call Foot that, but I feel like Giants is the real gatekeepers of Europe. Like they always beat the bottom teams and never beat any teams they're supposed to win against. They're supposed to lose against. Like never. And I feel like we're gonna continue with that here. I just think this team has like but I do think I actually see more potential though in this Giants core than I have before. Like I do think Cloud, Purpo, Thomasy, like that trio is like really, really good. Like a really solid core with those three. I do think Runner and Westside are on the edge of like maybe they're good enough for tier one, but it's like I don't see them staying for much longer, to be completely honest. And I think, but yeah, I could see Giants being really good in like a year or two if they just do some prospect development, find some good prospects, and just keep the Cloud Perpotometry core in it. I think this team could be really good in the future. But I do think currently with the team they have right now, I don't see it. I don't see this team being particularly amazing, and therefore I'm still picking Team Vitality in this clash. I do think Giants can look good, and I think they're gonna be sort of, as I said, that gatekeeper team. But Team Vitality is supposed to be better than them, and therefore they won't win this game. I'm gonna be pretty boring this week, to be completely honest. This is probably the least boring game, but I'm still gonna pick the team that I have as the highest rating. Although I will say, like, it's a bit odd for me to have them at the higher rating of the two. Some would argue, but I just think I'm just really high on this team, and it's. But yeah, the game is BBL versus Carmine Core, and the team I'm really high on is BBL. I know they didn't have the most like incredible kickoff, like considering um how much hype there was around them. I feel like their kickoff run, if you look at it, looks kind of underwhelming. But I feel like you need to watch the games, man. I do think the Team Heretics was just looking like Team Heretics that game, and then the longer the tournament went on, the worse they looked, and therefore I'm not really judging them on losing that 0-2. But the reason I have such like I'm so high on this team is like they kept close with Team Liquid, and some people call that a glue game. I don't care. I I don't agree with that. I think both of these teams just looked really good that game. Um, and then obviously they beat Fnatic, and then they beat Giants in a close game. I do think their games have been all been pretty close except for that Team Heretics game, which is probably the part where I'm like a bit more concerned maybe. But at the same time, I just think this roster is really good. Obviously they changed in Magnum for Vac. Novice is still on Shiwa, bit concerning with that, but I mean, considering I would say when Magnum isn't IGLing, his stats usually look better than this as well. I do think Magnum without IGL, which he's not going to be here, he's going to be um, he's probably going to be like a secondary caller for them though, like kind of calling with Yampi. But I think Magnum is an upgrade for Vac. I do think so. I know a lot of people have said it's more of a side grade, but I think you didn't watch. You didn't have your eyes open if you saw what Vac was doing. He was one of the worst players in kickoff. I know a lot of people say he did well for a sub, and yeah, that's about where you can end it, right? He did okay and well for being a sub. Magnum is a player that has consistently been able to produce decent tier 1 performances. And I think, although these stats doesn't look amazing, this was also when he was IGLing fully with KC last year. So um, I do think this is an upgrade. And I do think Magnum can add a bit of a dimension to this team that we might not have seen earlier. And can definitely help with like Yampi's calling, as Yampi's still obviously a pretty new IGL. Sociable looked absolutely incredible. I do think he passed every single test. Same with Profik, to be completely honest. The one where you look at the stats might look a bit concerning is Levin. And I do think Levin overall, like obviously he had that first game against Giants where he just absolutely went crazy and dropped like 60 kills. But then after that, he kind of cooled off a bit. He had a decent game against FNATIC, but nothing really special there. But I think he still looked good. And then he really struggled against Team Heretics and against Team Liquid. He struggled once again. And I do think there was some issues with maybe him still being new to the stage and everything. Um, I do think so. But overall, still, I do think he looked really solid. And I think his stats are more showing that he's new more than that he isn't good. Because I think if he can be more like if he can consistently hit his top performances, like this guy could be a top 3 duelist in the world. It genuinely, that's how good I think this guy can be. And I mean, with Profik, Sociable, and Jumpy, this team is actually really fucking scary. Like, really fucking scary. Um, and that's sort of my thoughts on them. Obviously, this week they are going to be playing Carmine Core. And Carmine Core, honestly, I don't know if I don't know if I'd say they looked disappointing in kickoff, but kind of. I do think that there is some issues I have with this roster just simply because I don't like the combo of Egg and Sadak. I think Eng has some pretty crazy ideas at times, and I think Sadak does too. So I just feel like when we watch them, it just becomes too crazy in a way. Like they're playing Harbor on almost every map. Like it's just, I feel like they need to reel that in. Really, I truly think they need to. If this is gonna look good. Um, like when we saw Eng on Gambit, like he had those crazy ideas he could pull together with Nats, but now Nats wasn't the IGL, right? It was Redgar. Um, and although Redgar obviously had some crazy ideas in him as well, at least there I felt like they had like the Shao, um, or not Shao. What am I saying? They had like the other like core of like Defo and what was it? Defo Shados, right? Or am I completely off? Let's see. It was Chronicle, Defo, and Shados, yeah. And I feel like those three kind of reeled it back then. And I feel like this core had a bunch of vocal players, especially I think Chronicle and Shados mostly was the ones that just reeled it back in and could kind of help this team still play at a decent level. Like that was so good about Gambit, right? Was they had so many vocal players that could give ideas that although some ideas might have been a bit crazy, they were revolutionary at the time. They really were. And I just think this team doesn't really have that many of those vocal players anymore. And the ones that are vocal are the crazy ones, like Sadak and Eng. Um, but yeah, otherwise though, I mean, Aves looked incredible. Sugetsu looked like Sugetsu. Elite looked decent. Martine looked like Martine. Like he's always gonna be that good enough duelist, I think, in tier one. That's sort of where I put Martine. He's like this sort of duelist that's like you can't really complain. Like he's not that superstar, obviously, but he's not bad. Like he's always gonna be consistently decent. And then Sadak looked like Sadak once again. I feel like this team is just kind of boring in that way. Like they just had absolutely abysmal comps and then just played pretty okay. Like obviously we had the Deadlock Vice, which I think is actually gonna be better now. But then just Harbor Omen Yoru single duelist on Lotus. The Harbor Omen on Haven with that KJ. I do think their bind is going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, Harbor Astron Abyss as well. Like this, I don't know, man. This team was just weird. It was just really weird. But I do think with prep time they could look good. But I don't see them beating BBL. I think this BBL team, especially with the addition of Magnum, is going to look really good. I do think this team is just simply like scared. Like I genuinely think this BBL team could be in the running for Toronto. I think that much. I think this team is that good. I think KC are going to be a definite playoff team. I think going to Toronto is going to be difficult for them. Moving on, we have not Giant X, but Apex versus Team Vitality. And I don't really know what to think here. Because we're going to start with Team Heretics, obviously. And man, was this roster disappointing in kickoff. Boo looked kind of shit. Mini Boo looked alright, but he had like no help going onto site, and the coordination was just absolutely abysmal. And Rian's looked really good still mechanically, but once again, kind of just weren't really playing with Mini Boo that much, which was just weird. And then Benji just had an absolutely abysmal tournament, like just absolutely terrible. I feel bad for him, man. But I do trust this team to come back. Like I do trust Nilzinho, Weber, and all of them to come back. I mean, Benji is not gonna have this bad of a tournament again. I don't believe so. I don't think that's gonna be possible. And I do think Team Heretics will come back this, split. And I mean, they're playing Apex their first game. I mean, what do you want? What do you want me to say, man? They brought out in Governor for Hype, which I think is a good change. Hype had a pretty poor kickoff, and Governor, although his stats looks god awful in Pacific kickoff, you got to look at the context in that, and I do think Governor is actually a really good player. If I were to guess, he's gonna be sort of that. He's not gonna play duelist like he did in Talon. I think he's gonna be probably playing sort of recon initiator flex. If I were to guess, play a bit of Sova. Probably quite a lot of Sova actually. And then we're gonna have floor play duelist. And hopefully I hope that they're gonna put Batu onto the Senti / duelist flex, kind of similar to Meteor. I think that's probably where he's gonna shine the most. Cause like I think that's honestly why they brought in Governor for Hype, because we know Governor Sova is very proven, and Batu, the second he played Yoru, it looked absolutely stellar. The second he played Sova, it looked absolutely terrible. And you're gonna say, why do you want him to play Senti then? Because he has not played Senti ever. Because I think what you saw with that was that the mechanical skill of Batu is absolutely incredible. Like, he went 27, 16, and 6, and that's not even telling the full story, because he went 20 and 6 on defense. Like, and they played a shit comp on this Pearl, to be completely frank. Like, that's why it got close in the end. On the Pearl against Team Liquid. Like, they played this Phoenix, Yoru, Killjoy. Like, it was a shit comp. But Floor and Batu just fucking fried. And I feel like, imagine this team with like a Floor Yoru with Batu on like Chamber. Like, sure, Batu did play your did play Euro that match, but Floor can play Euro. She's done so in the past. And although Batu hasn't played Senti, I feel like that's such a good role for him. Because also because a lot of the kills he got on that defensive half was with the op. Like, imagine if they go into that G2 comp on Pearl, and then put Governor on Sova and have like a cracked Batu just playing setups without Senti. I feel like that could be really good. But let's not get too hyped up. All right. I still think this team is not gonna be very good. I think just Malsi and Ova are like those sort of players where it's like they're good enough to be top players in tier 2, but when it comes to tier 1, they're like right there where it's like they don't really work. Same with Hype. And then Batu, Floor, and Governor, I think, is a good trio to pick up, and I think they could look really exciting, but I just don't see this team really being that good overall. I just don't see this team really going very far this year, and I'm probably expecting them to, at the max, make playoffs, and if they do that, they're probably lucky. And if they do that, they're probably going to go through Ascension. Or they're going to go through Ascension and probably win it, to be completely honest, because I think this Apex team is good enough for that. I do think they need to change some things up, though, if they want to look better than this. I think the Governor change was good, but I think Avova Mulsi. I think Avova is good enough, but Mulsi needs to, like, they need some change up in this sort of core. I think it's funny because like this Apex core was never really like more than decent, you know. And that's why it took them a little while, but eventually they managed to get out of this. I think Apex is a good org to have in tier 1 though, but yeah, I don't think this team is good enough. And that's why I'm obviously picking Team Vitality. And another mistake here with with Apex's logo being orange. It shouldn't be. I am really doing Apex dirty. Then we move on to Foot versus Koi. And I think this game is going to be a pretty swift 2-0. I mean, we just have a Foot team, which are just kind of really good against a pretty bad Koi team. I do have one issue, though, and I think this has always been sort of the issue that makes me doubt Foot in a way. Because as you see, my Foot rating is actually below BBL. It's similar to like KC. And I don't understand why the fuck they're keeping Krax. Like, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I know Krax has been playing for this team since like 2021. And before that, yeah, this guy's been playing for this team for so long. I get it. All right. But please, man, for the love of God, you can't have a player that is the best KO player in the world, but can't play any other agent. Like, that just doesn't work. And you're sure, you might be like, okay, but like KO's still a decent agent. Yeah, he's met on one map, Ascent. And then you could arguably play him on like Pearl, Icebox, maybe, but I don't like him on Icebox either. And I'd say he's like arguable to play on Pearl. But otherwise, it's like there's no reason for me to play KO on any other map in the game. And this guy unless he's playing KO, just looks absolutely abysmal. And it's just like you can't have a like he's just limiting this team so much. Like the potential of this team is just so limited by having cracks on the roster because they do have a really good roster. Like Yetuye is one of the best Sentinel players in the world. Zeus is looking like he could potentially be one of the best duelist players in the world. If he continues like this, and Mr. Fallen and Ada Captain are great players. But then you just have cracks there. And it's like, oh, we have a Flash Initiator that only can play KO. And if he doesn't play KO, he just looks like shit. Like, to be completely frank, like, looking from kickoff alone, his KO, 0.99 rating, like 0.9 KD, solid stats, fade. 0.78 with a 0.78 KD. Like, it just looks like shit, to be completely frank. Like, his KO, 1.07 rating in his career with a 1.03 KD. Then second is Sage. Sage. And to be completely frank, the only map I can see them being like, okay, he plays KO on, like, I can see them doing like this. All right, this is what I would be able to see them doing. All right, you play KO on Ascent. You play Sage on Icebox. And then you play Fade on every other map. And maybe your Fade can look better because it has looked good in the past. But yeah, I just don't see it. I just don't see why they're keeping cracks more than that they like him, basically. But yeah, Koi is Koi. Still. Flyer had a rough kickoff. Same with Grubinho, to be completely honest. I feel like this team is just kind of like Feel and Soulcast are like players that are like good enough for tier 1, but are never gonna be like the players that lead a team to victory, you know? It's kind of the same with Shados for me, although Shados has like his peak performances are fucking insane, but also he has a pretty low floor, like we saw in kickoff. Grubinho is one of those players that if he can play consistently at his top level, he is that star for this team. To be completely honest, he's that good. I do think he's one of the more underrated players in the world right now. Although obviously had a bit of a rough kickoff, I do think he is just absolutely ludicrously good when he plays well. Which he did do in kickoff, to be fair, but he has that potential to be really, 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 really fucking good. And then Flya had a rough kickoff. I do think he's probably going to get a bit better. I do have some hope for this Koi team. I do think they can make like some upsets, but I think Foot is not going to be one of them. I do think they could win against like a Gentlemates. They could maybe make like an upset win against like a KC. Like they could make some upset. Like I could see this team making upset wins, but I don't think they're gonna be a top team in the EMEA. I just don't see it. I see it being this group that they're either bottom or one team completely flops it. Their group is just too. They're just clearly the worst team in their group. So I am picking Foot. I'm picking Foot here. I know I have some issues with Foot, but they're still gonna be a good team no matter what. And that's kind of why I'm frustrated with them because I feel like if they don't get rid of cracks, they're always gonna be that no matter what good team, but never trophy winning team. But yeah, moving on to FNATIC versus Navi. And we start with FNATIC, where Elma Putty got fired. Milan goes up as head coach instead of assistant coach, and they bring on Scott. Obviously, they had Dubros for like 2 weeks or so as well, and then he got sick and basically left the roster for, I don't know if he was sick or if it was personal reasons, but something like that. There was probably something that happened, and he just felt like, all right, as of right now, I don't really feel like I'm mentally capable of playing, or not of playing, of coaching and working in this sort of pace. So I'm just gonna like go inactive or whatever, because it really felt like it just says becomes inactive, right? He's still on Fnatic. It's just he isn't working currently. Um, but still, they got a bit of time with him, and they brought in Milan, or they have Milan as head coach now instead of assistant coach, which I think is a good change because I do like Milan a lot. I think Scott looked really good as that assistant coach on BBL. I'm actually really happy with these changes, to be completely honest. Um, I do think Alma was a big problem for Fnatic. I genuinely believe so. Um, and sure, you might be like, oh, well, it wasn't really like Alma, like, it was just Alma getting tossed the roster after Mini, and you can't really compare him to Mini. Yes, I know. But even when they had their main roster, they didn't look that good. And Elma hadn't really proved it in the past. Like, to be completely frank, like, if you look, like, he was coaching Genji before. And you're gonna say, oh, Genji is a good team, right? Yeah, you wanna know what his Genji did? You wanna know what his Genji did in Pacific? His Genji finished, barely made playoffs, and then went out and then went fourth in Pacific in playoffs. And you're gonna say that's a pretty okay team, right? That's a pretty okay team. Yeah. Well, fourth in Pacific, and he had like a 7-player roster with like Sylvan. We had Meteor. We had like the thing is, this team still had Meteor. This team still had like um obviously T1 actually had Munchkin, which is kind of funny. But like this team had Meteor on the roster playing Duelist, and then yeah, I don't even know what he was doing with this team, but they were just not that good, and they could have been a lot better. So I just feel like Elma hadn't shown much. He really hadn't, in my opinion. He really hadn't shown much, and then coming over to Fnatic, I don't think he looked particularly good last year either. Like, sure, they won EMEA. Yes, I know. I know they did with Alma. So it looks like, oh yeah, he was pretty good, right? Especially considering, like, when you look at, like, stage 2, they literally did not lose a single game. Like, stage 2, they won every single game in playoffs, and they went, and I'm pretty sure if we check stage 2, they proceeded to win week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. Against Team Vitality, BBL, KC, and Team Liquid. But to be completely frank, they didn't do shit in Shanghai, and they barely got into stage 1 playoffs after winning their first 3 easy games and then getting absolutely demolished by Foot and then losing to Na'Vi. They barely managed to make playoffs. One against Team Liquid, one against KC, and then lost to Team Heretics in the upper final, and then one against Foot, and then managed to barely win it out against Team Heretics in the grand final. And then, or they made like that sort of reverse sweep, obviously, and then just bombed out completely in Shanghai, and obviously did absolutely horrendously in kickoff. So I feel like he didn't look that good. Like, sure, they made like top 6 in champs as well, but I just never really enjoyed how Elma Putty was playing with this Fnatic roster, and I do think they had the quality of players to be a top contender last year. And I do think I'm more impressed with what Milan has done before. Like, obviously, he was playing for Giants. He was the Giant X manager um, throughout. Um, he was the Giant X manager throughout 2024. I'm pretty sure. And that might sound like, oh shit, so he was shit, right? Uh, Considering Giant X went 1-4 in stage 2. But you gotta remember the Giants team that he was coaching had Cloud, yes, and Purple. Then they have Fitinho, who is playing in tier 2 now, and is looking alright, but he's not that good. Then they had Hoodie, who is playing in tier 2. And then they have Redger, who is retired. Like, this team was not good. This team was not good at all last year. And not only did they go 1-4 in stage 1, they then went on to, in stage 2, go 3-7. And you're gonna say, that's not very good. That's not very good. I know. But they got 3 wins. And like the wins they got actually looked pretty good. Like, that was the thing, right? They beat Gentlemates, which is a game they should win, right? And it looked pretty solid. And then they beat Na'Vi 2-0. And that was a bad Na'Vi team, sure. They had a bad, rough tier 2, but they actually looked pretty good in this stage. So they started off with those 2 wins, then they lost a close game to Team Heretics, lost to Foot, and then I'm pretty sure they, let's see, what was their final game? No, that was all, I think. Either way, I think they actually looked pretty good with Milan. Like, this team had 2 players and 3 players that doesn't even belong in tier 1. Like, it was basically a tier 2 team, Giant X last year. And he managed to upset win against Na'Vi. And on top of that, he managed to keep it close against one of the best teams last year. So I actually really like Milan. And I do think that Scott is a good addition as well. And obviously, this team has the players. I mean, Kayak struggled a bit to start, but then after the first loss to BBL, where he looked meh at best, he absolutely started frying. I mean, 73 kills against Na'Vi. And then against Gentlemates, he dropped 44, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you see that the second highest is 34, and that's Alpha year, and then after that it's 23, yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. And then against Foot, he didn't do amazingly, but neither did any player on FNATIC that game. So he absolutely fried after that game. After a bit of a rough first game, I think Kayak just looked absolutely stellar. And then Alfier looked like Alfier. Chronicle looked like Chronicle. Crashies, I will say, probably will look better. I do think he had a bit of an adjustment period, and I think they're gonna look better. And I do think Boaster actually looked a lot better in terms of aim and everything. Like him mechanically just looked so much better, and I do trust that this team will be a top team in the EMEA. I genuinely do. I genuinely could see them winning EMEA again, and making Toronto. Could I see them winning a trophy this year? Maybe. It's not likely, but I could see them going far in an international. And honestly, if they look equally as good as they looked last year, I think that's a success. Obviously, last year they won an EMEA trophy, which I don't think that's like good. I don't think they're good enough for that. But I do think, like, if they can have a solid run at champs, and then maybe do better, make Toronto and do better there than they did in Shanghai last year, I do think this year has been successful for FNATIC. Considering all the issues with Leo and everything, I do think this is going to be a successful year for FNATIC. And I do see them actually looking better than I think a lot of people think they will. And Navi, I'm very low on Navi. I do think Angel is just kind of not good enough anymore. Like he just isn't. Like look at those numbers, man. And sure, you might say, well, he is basically a fully new roster. Yes, but he's looked this shit for the past year and a half, and I just think with a player looking that shit and basically throwing away rounds for his team as their IGL, you're just not gonna win trophies, man. Shao and Roxic looked absolutely incredible. I think Qualanoob might need some adjustment time, but I still think he looked okay. And I think Hero definitely needs some adjustment time. He looked really uncomfortable in kickoff, but he proved himself in FNATIC last year, so I don't doubt that he will look better. So I do think the team's going to look better. And I would be surprised if they didn't make playoffs. Considering I do think they're going to beat Navi and Giants. I do think those two games should be pretty winnable. So going 2-3 probably is what I'd expect this team to do in this group, which should be enough to make playoffs. Like it should be. But yeah, I think Navi is going to be like a pretty mid team, but I don't. But I could see them going on like a slight run, but I don't think they're ever gonna like deal damage. Let's say that much. So I'm picking FNATIC here. Obviously, I'm a FNATIC head, so why wouldn't I? But yeah, moving on to the final game. I'm pretty sure this is. Yes, the final game is Team Liquid versus Gentlemates, and this one is pretty simple. I'm gonna try to wrap this up pretty quickly because the video is getting long. But Team Liquid out with Kamek, in with Serial. I think this change is a bit weird. I do think Serial is a good player. He's a Senti player though, and Kamek was playing not Senti for this team. Like Kamek was playing sort of a flex initiator controller type of role. So I don't really know what they're thinking of doing. I mean, Kiko's probably going to continue playing full smokes, and then they're going to have Potty playing initiator, and Serial has been a full-time Senti player for a long while now. And maybe he'll play, but he's, to be fair, he has played like Sky and KO. So he can play that sort of flash initiator role, but at the same time, that's sort of Patty's role though. So I don't really know who's going to play Silva on this team, first of all. Second of all, how the roles are going to work fully, but I think it should be fine. I think Team Liquid should be solid. I do think Kamek looked a bit inconsistent at times, but looked really good when he looked good. But yeah, next second team is obviously going to be Gentlemates, which Robbie BK, if he's not IGLing, I understand why they dropped him because he was IGLing, as I understood it, but seems like they're gonna change that and maybe have mini IGLing. I might be wrong on that though. But yeah, either way, Robbie B mini. By the way, also, he looked good. Don't get me wrong, but I did know like his stats are insane, like insane. And then obviously they have Cadaver, Sip, and Click, which I think is a solid core, a really solid core, and I think Kami can be a good addition to this roster. I do think though that like isn't Cadaver their smokes player? Is he gonna go full initiator now? Pretty sure he might actually go full initiator, which actually might be good for Kamik, to be completely honest. Like going to that sort of Sova, Gecko, Teo sort of role, I could see that working for him. And I think this is a pretty decent roster move if, but I'm not sure how Gentlemates will look. I still think they're not going to be incredible, but I could see them making playoffs. Like I could honestly like see any team here except for maybe Koi and Apex make playoffs. But yeah, I think this team is really good. I think they're going to be good. They're not going to be Team Liquid though. To be completely frank, if there's any time they could be Team Liquid, it's now. But I don't think they're going to be Team Liquid. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Maybe comment what you thought of my takes. If you have any insider information or something, I don't know. And I will see you in the next one.